Ugh. Manic and slick. Trembling fingers are a disastrous combination when your life is on the line. Haby meant to text her mother just one frantic plea, "Mom, please help." He broke my arm. One wrong digit sent her terrified message into the void. She braced herself for cold silence, or perhaps a confused stranger. Instead, 3 gray dots instantly materialized on her shattered screen, followed by a chilling reply that would violently alter her destiny. Wrong number. But I'm on my way. She had no idea who was about to kick her apartment door off its hinges, but Boston's criminal underworld certainly did. The cramped South Boston apartment smelled of stale beer, damp carpet, and the sharp, metallic tang of fear. Outside, a relentless November rain lashed against the single grime-caked window, but the storm inside was far more violent. Hebe Carmichael backed into the peeling dry wall of the narrow hallway, her chest heaving. She was 26, a quiet accountant with a soft, full-figured body that she had spent most of her life trying to hide beneath oversized cardigans. She had always been self-conscious about her weight, a vulnerability that Derek Walsh, her boyfriend of 2 years, had weaponized with surgical precision. Derek stood between her and the front door, swaying slightly, his knuckles white around the neck of a half-empty whiskey bottle. His eyes were completely black, stripped of any humanity, hollowed out by alcohol and a mounting gambling debt that he took out on her every single night. "Where do you think you're going?" Derek slurred, taking a slow, heavy step forward. "I'm leaving, Derek," Hebe said, her voice trembling despite her desperate attempt to keep it steady. She clutched her purse to her chest like a shield. "I can't do this anymore. You're out of control." Derek let out a cruel, barking laugh that echoed off the bare walls. "Leaving? You? Look at yourself, Hebe." He gestured toward her with the bottle, his lip curling in disgust. "You're a fat, pathetic cow. Who else is going to put up with you? Who else is going to look twice at you? You're lucky I even let you sleep in my bed." The words hit her like physical blows, reopening old deep wounds. For 2 years he had systematically dismantled her self-esteem, until she believed she was entirely unlovable. But tonight was different. Tonight the fear had finally eclipsed the shame. "Let me pass," she whispered, taking a step to the side. Derek lunged. It happened with terrifying speed. He dropped the bottle it shattered against the cheap linoleum and grabbed her right arm. Hebe screamed as his fingers dug into her soft flesh, bruising it instantly. She tried to pull away, her heavy frame working against his grip, but Derek was running on pure adrenaline-fueled rage. He twisted her forearm backward violently, unnaturally. A sickening snap cracked through the small apartment, a sound like a dry tree branch breaking. The pain was an immediate, blinding explosion of white light. Hebe let out a guttural shriek, dropping to her knees as her radius bone fractured completely. Her arm hung at a grotesque, unnatural angle. "Shut up," Derek roared, suddenly panicked by the volume of her scream. He kicked her squarely in the ribs, knocking the wind out of her. "Shut the hell up, or I'll break the other one." Gasping for air, fighting through the wave of nausea that accompanied the agonizing pain in her arm, Hebe scrambled backward. She kicked her legs, sliding across the slick linoleum until she reached the bathroom. She threw her heavy weight against the flimsy wooden door, slamming it shut and clicking the lock, just as Derek threw his shoulder against the other side. "Open the door, Hebe," he screamed, pounding his fists against the wood. The frame shuddered. Hebe sank to the bath mat, cradling her useless, throbbing right arm against her chest. She was hyperventilating, the edges of her vision turning dark. She needed an ambulance. She needed the police. But Derek had smashed her smartphone 3 days ago to stop her from talking to her friends. With her trembling left hand, she reached into her bra and pulled out the cheap, plastic burner phone she had secretly bought at a gas station yesterday. It was a prepaid brick, her absolute last resort. She hadn't had time to program any contacts into it. The bathroom door buckled inward under another heavy blow from Derek. The wood began to splinter near the hinges. He was going to get in. If he got in, he was going to kill her. Tears blinding her, Hebe fumbled with the tiny keypad. She needed her mother. Barbara Carmichael lived 20 minutes away in Dorchester and had a licensed fire. Hebe typed the number from memory. 617-555-0198. Her thumb was slick with cold sweat. Her whole body was convulsing in shock. She missed the 9 and hit the 8. 617-555-0188. She didn't notice. She quickly typed a text, ignoring the lack of punctuation, fueled purely by survival instinct. "Mom, please help me." Derek went crazy. He brubbed my arm. "I'm in the bathroom, 42 West Street, Apt 3. He is going to kill me." She hit send. The screen glowed pale blue in the dark bathroom. The message bubble popped up. Sent. "I'm going to tear this door off the hinges, you fat bitch." Derek howled from the hallway, his boots slamming into the bottom panel. Wood cracked. A hole appeared near the floor. Hebe pulled her knees to her chest, sobbing silently, staring at the little screen. "Please, Mum. Please be awake." 30 seconds passed. The longest 30 seconds of Hebe's life. Then the phone vibrated in her palm. A reply. Hebe brought the screen to her tear-filled eyes, expecting her mother's frantic assurance that she was calling 911. Instead, the reply was from the unknown number she had accidentally typed. It was concise. It was cold. It made the blood freeze in her veins. "Wrong number. But I'm on my way. Do not open the door." Hebe stared at the screen. A wave of profound terror washed over her. Who did I just text? Another heavy kick hit the door. The top hinge gave way. Derek's bloodshot eye appeared in the crack. "Found you," he whispered maliciously. 5 miles away, in the VIP lounge of a high-end underground casino in the North End, Godiva Sterling was having a quiet drink. Godiva was 34, standing 6'3", with shoulders like a heavyweight boxer and the sharp, unforgiving features of a marble statue. He was the head of the Sterling Syndicate, a ruthless criminal enterprise that controlled the city's docks, illegal gambling, and extortion rackets. Dressed in a bespoke charcoal Tom Ford suit, he exuded a quiet, terrifying authority. Men died for looking at him the wrong way. He was in the middle of a hushed conversation with his underboss Frankie the Bull Latier, discussing a shipment of stolen Italian sports cars when a distinct buzz vibrated in his breast pocket. Godiva frowned. It was his secure line. The encrypted phone was known only to Frankie, his younger sister, and his accountant. He pulled a sleek black device from his pocket and looked at the screen. It was an SMS from an unregistered burner number. He opened it. "Mom, please help me. Derek went crazy. He broke my arm. I'm in the bathroom, 42 West Street, Apt 3. He is going to kill me." Godiva stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. The music in the casino, the clinking of glasses, the hum of the city outside, all of it vanished, replaced by a deafening roar in his ears. He broke my arm. Suddenly, Godiva wasn't 34 anymore. He was 10 years old, hiding in a closet in a dilapidated row house, listening to his mother scream as his alcoholic father broke her bones. The memory was a visceral, burning brand on his soul. It was the trauma that had turned him into a monster, the very reason he had murdered his own father at 16 and taken to the streets. He had a singular, unbending rule in his empire. Women and children were off limits. Any man in his crew caught raising a hand to a woman was found floating in the harbor. Godiva stared at the address, 42 West Street. It was barely 5 minutes away. "Boss?" Frankie asked, noticing the sudden terrifying shift in Godiva's demeanor. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Godiva's eyes, usually a cool, calculating gray, were pitch black. Godiva typed a rapid reply. "Wrong number. That I'm on my way." "Do not open the door." He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "Frankie, bring the car out front. Now. Where are we going?" "West Street," Godiva said, his voice a low, lethal gravel. "Someone needs to be taught a lesson in manners." 3 minutes later, a black, bulletproof SUV tore through the rain-slicked streets of Boston, running 2 red lights before screeching to a halt outside a run-down brick apartment complex. Godiva didn't wait for his men. He stepped out into the pouring rain, his tailored suit instantly getting wet, and walked toward the entrance. The front door of the building was locked, requiring a key fob. Godiva didn't pause. He stepped back, raised his right leg, and drove his heel perfectly into the locking mechanism. The glass shattered, the metal bent, and the door flew open. He took the stairs to the second floor 2 at a time, his footsteps totally silent despite his size. Frankie and 2 other armed men hurried behind him, struggling to keep up. Apartment 3. Through the thin wooden door, Godiva could hear a man screaming. "I'm gonna snap your neck, you stupid fat bitch. Open this door." Godiva didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. He simply raised his foot and kicked the apartment door directly next to the deadbolt. The frame exploded inward in a shower of splinters and drywall. Inside the apartment, Derek spun around, freezing in shock. He was standing in a narrow hallway, a hammer in his hand, preparing to bash in the handle of the bathroom door. Derek blinked at the giant of a man standing in his ruined doorway. Godiva was dripping wet, his face cast in shadows, looking like a demon summoned from the abyss. "Who the hell are you?" Derek spat, raising the hammer, though his hands were shaking. "Get out of my house." Godiva stepped over the threshold, his eyes scanning the room. He saw the shattered whiskey bottle. He saw the blood on the linoleum. He saw the ruined bathroom door. The scent of fear was palpable. "Drop the hammer, Derek," Godiva said softly. It wasn't a request. It was an absolute decree. "Screw you." Derek lunged, swinging the hammer wildly toward Godiva's head. Godiva moved with a fluid, terrifying grace. He caught Derek's wrist in midair with his left hand. The momentum stopped instantly. Godiva's grip was like an industrial vice. He squeezed. Derek gasped, his eyes widening in agony as the bones in his wrist ground together. The hammer slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the floor. "You like breaking things, Derek," Godiva whispered, leaning in so close Derek could smell the expensive cologne and absolute death radiating from him. Before Derek could answer, Godiva drove his right knee squarely into Derek's stomach. The air exploded from Derek's lungs. As the man doubled over, Godiva brought his elbow down like a sledgehammer onto the back of Derek's neck. Derek collapsed to the floor, coughing and gagging. Godiva wasn't finished. He looked at the splintered bathroom door, then down at the pathetic man groveling on the floor. Godiva placed his heavy leather dress shoe deliberately over Derek's right kneecap. "You broke her arm," Godiva stated, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "Wait, please, man. I didn't mean to," Derek sobbed, suddenly sobering up, realizing he had crossed paths with the predator far higher on the food chain. Godiva shifted his weight, pressing down hard. The sickening crunch of Derek's kneecap shattering echoed through the apartment, followed instantly by a blood-curdling scream. "Shut up," Godiva commanded. Frankie and the 2 men stepped into the apartment, looking down at Derek with cold indifference. "What do you want us to do with this garbage, boss?" Frankie asked. "Let's take him to the warehouse," Godiva said, not looking at Derek. "Keep him breathing. I want to have a long conversation with him later." As the men dragged a whimpering, half-conscious Derek out of the apartment, Godiva turned his attention to the bathroom door. He stepped over the debris and lightly tapped on the wood. "He's gone," Godiva said, softening his voice just a fraction. "You're safe. Open the door." Inside the bathroom, Hebe was a trembling mess. She had heard the crash. She had heard Derek's screams. She slowly, agonizingly reached up with her good hand and turned the lock. The door creaked open. Hebe looked up. She was expecting a police officer. Instead, she found herself staring at a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of Forbes, or perhaps a wanted poster. He was breathtakingly handsome, but his eyes were hard, calculating, and deeply intimidating. Godiva looked down at her. He took in her tear-streaked face, her tangled hair, and the way she was cradling her right arm, which was swelling rapidly and turning a horrific shade of purple. He also noticed her body. Where Derek had seen something to mock and degrade, Godiva saw something completely different. He saw soft, beautiful curves, a vulnerability that struck a chord deep within his hardened chest, and a remarkable quiet strength in her hazel eyes. She was real. She wasn't one of the plastic, hollow socialites he usually dealt with. "You texted the wrong number," Godiva said quietly, kneeling down slowly so he wouldn't tower over her. I missed the 9, Hebe stammered, her teeth chattering from shock. Who are you?" "My name is Godiva," he said, reaching out. He stopped an inch from her face, waiting for her permission. When she didn't flinch away, he gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "And you are coming with me. Let's get that arm fixed." The ride in the back of the Maybach was a surreal fever dream. The plush leather seats, the tinted windows shutting out the torrential rain, and the total soundproof silence were a stark contrast to the chaotic hell she had just escaped. Hebe sat huddled against the passenger door, shivering violently despite the warm air blowing from the vents. Her arm was a constant, screaming agony. Every time the car went over a bump, she winced, biting her lip to keep from crying out. Godiva sat opposite her, giving her space. He had taken off his wetsuit jacket and draped it over her trembling shoulders. It was heavy and smelled of rain, cedarwood, and something undeniably masculine. He had barely spoken since carrying her down the stairs of her apartment building. He had lifted her with shocking ease, holding her full weight against his chest as if she weighed nothing at all. For a woman who had been told daily that she was huge, disgusting, and burdensome, being carried so effortlessly by this giant of a man completely short-circuited her brain. "Dr. Harrison is waiting at the estate," Godiva said suddenly, his deep voice breaking the silence. "He's the best orthopedic surgeon in the city. He'll set the bone and cast it." Hebe blinked, her mind foggy from pain and adrenaline. "Estate? Wait. No, please, just take me to Mass General Hospital." "My insurance." "You can't go to a public hospital," Godiva interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "If you go to an ER with injuries like that, the police get involved. They take statements. I want the police involved." Hebe cried out, her voice cracking. "Derek broke my arm. He tried to kill me." Godiva looked out the Rain Street window, his jaw clenching tight. "Derek won't be a problem for you ever again. I guarantee it. But if the police start poking around this incident, they'll find me. And that is complicated. You are under my protection now. The hospital comes to you." Hebe stared at him, the reality of the situation slowly dawning on her. Sterling. She remembered the name Derek would whisper when he was terrified about his gambling debts. The Sterling Syndicate. You're a mobster," she breathed, shrinking back against the leather. Godiva turned his sharp gray eyes back to her. He didn't smile, but his expression softened marginally. "I am a businessman who operates outside the conventional margins of the law. But right now, to you, I am just a man who answered a text message. Relax, Hebe. You have nothing to fear from me." 20 minutes later, the heavy iron gates of a sprawling, heavily guarded estate in Lake Forest swung open. The SUV glided up a long, winding driveway, stopping beneath the grand portico of a massive stone mansion. Before Hebe could attempt to open her door with her good hand, Godiva was there. He opened the door, reached in, and scooped her up into his arms again. "I can walk," she protested weakly, feeling her cheeks flush hotly. "I'm too heavy." "Stop," Godiva commanded softly, stopping in his tracks and looking down at her. "Never say that again. You're not heavy. You are perfect, and you are hurt." Hebe's breath caught in her throat. No man had ever called her perfect. The sincerity in his eyes made her want to weep all over again. He carried her through grand, vaulted hallways adorned with priceless art, past armed men in dark suits who politely averted their eyes, and finally into a massive, sterile medical suite built directly into the east wing of the house. Dr. One. Arthur Harrison, an older gentleman with a kind face and a stark white coat, was waiting alongside a female nurse. "Put her on the table, Godiva," Dr. Harrison instructed, immediately snapping on latex gloves. "Let's see the damage." The next hour was a blur of bright lights, the sharp prick of an IV needle, and the blissful warm wave of strong painkillers flooding her system. Godiva never left the room. He stood in the corner, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes never leaving Hebe. When Dr. Harrison finally manipulated the broken bones back into place, Hebe let out a sharp cry, her eyes rolling back briefly. Godiva had surged forward instantly, his hand gripping her uninjured left hand tight. "Breathe, sweetheart. It's over. The worst is over," Godiva murmured, his thumb stroking her knuckles. Once the heavy fiberglass cast was applied and her arm was secured in a sling, the nurse helped Hebe change out of her ruined, blood-stained clothes and into a massive, incredibly soft silk pajama set that clearly belonged to Godiva. Hebe lay in the center of a California king bed in one of the guest suites, feeling like she was floating on a cloud of hydromorphone. The room was luxurious, lit by the warm glow of a fireplace. The door opened quietly and Godiva walked in. He had changed into dark slacks and a black cashmere sweater. He pulled a heavy wingback chair to the side of the bed and sat down. "How is the pain?" he asked, pouring her a glass of water from a crystal carafe on the nightstand. "Manageable," Hebe whispered, taking the glass with her good hand. She took a sip. "Thank you. For everything. You saved my life." "You shouldn't have needed saving," Godiva said bitterly. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I had my men do some digging on Derek Walsh while the doctor was working on you." Hebe tensed. "He's just a drunk. A terrible person. He's a degenerate gambler," Godiva corrected. "He owed my organization $50,000. He's been dodging my collectors for 3 months. Hebe's eyes widened. I didn't know he owed you." "It gets worse," Godiva continued, his voice devoid of pity, giving her the harsh truth. "He told my collectors last week that he would have the money soon. He bragged that his girlfriend, pardon his language, but he called you his fat meal ticket, was about to inherit her grandmother's house in Salem. He said he was going to force you to sign the deed over to him so he could sell it and pay off his debts." Hebe felt a cold emptiness hollow out her stomach. The inheritance. Her grandmother had passed away 2 months ago, and the paperwork was finalizing this week. Derek had suddenly been so interested in the process. He had never loved her. He hadn't even just been staying with her out of habit. She was a pawn. Tears spilled over her eyelashes, silently soaking into the expensive pillows. "I was so stupid," she choked out. "I stayed with him because I thought no one else would want me." Godiva stood up. He sat on the edge of the mattress, surprisingly gentle for a man of his size and reputation. He reached out, his large, rough hand cupping her cheek, wiping away the tears. "Derek is a dead man walking," Godiva promised, a dark, terrifying oath hidden in his calm tone. "He is currently chained to a radiator in my warehouse. He will never speak your name again. He will never see the sun again." Hebe shivered, but to her own surprise, it wasn't out of fear of Godiva. It was a dark, twisted sense of relief. "As for you," Godiva continued, his eyes tracing the soft curve of her jawline, moving down to the fullness of her lips, "you are not stupid. You were preyed upon. And you are going to stay here until you heal, until we sort this out." "I can't stay here," Hebe whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I don't belong in a Mafia boss's house." Godiva leaned in closer, his lips hovering mere inches from hers. The scent of him was intoxicating. "You belong wherever I say you belong, Hebe. And right now, I say you belong under my roof. Get some sleep." Provisional conclusion. Flash forward, a year later. The sprawling Sterling estate was no longer a gilded cage, it was her home. Hebe stood in the grand foyer, adjusting the neckline of her tailored emerald green evening gown. The dress hugged her full curves perfectly, a testament to the confidence Godiva had relentlessly nurtured in her. The ghost of Derek Walsh and the trauma of that night were buried deep, replaced by a fierce, protective love. Godiva emerged from his study, his eyes darkening with blatant hunger as he took her in. He stepped close, wrapping an arm around her waist and pressing a soft kiss to her neck. "You look breathtaking, Maya Regina," he murmured. She smiled, leaning into the man who had answered a wrong number and became her absolute protector. "Let's go," she said, her voice steady and full of life. "The city is waiting for us." Morning arrived, not with the blare of a cheap alarm clock and the stale smell of Derek's hangovers, but with the soft, golden light of the Massachusetts sun filtering through sheer silk curtains. Hebe woke up disoriented. For a terrifying fraction of a second, she thought she was back in the cramped South Boston apartment. Her heart slammed against her ribs and she instinctively flinched, expecting a blow. But the mattress beneath her was like a cloud. The linens smelled of expensive lavender detergent, and the only sound was the distant, soothing crackle of a dying fire in the massive stone hearth across the room. Then the dull, throbbing ache in her right arm brought everything rushing back. The shattered bone, the wrong number, the giant in the bespoke suit who had kicked her door off its hinges. Godiva Sterling. She tried to sit up, wincing as her heavy fiberglass cast shifted against her chest. She was still wearing his oversized silk pajamas. They swallowed her full figure, yet the fabric draped over her curves in a way that felt strangely luxurious, a stark contrast to the baggy, shapeless sweatpants she usually wore to hide her body. A soft knock at the heavy oak door made her jump. "Come in," she called out, her voice raspy. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 40s, dressed in a sharp-tailored black suit that looked vaguely militant. She had striking red hair pulled into a severe bun and a face that was unreadable, though not entirely unkind. "Good morning, Miss Carmichael. My name is Bridget Gallagher. Mr. Sterling assigned me as your personal security detail and liaison within the estate," the woman said, stepping into the room with a silver tray. "I've brought you breakfast and your morning pain medication." Heavy stared at her. "Security detail?" Inside the house, Bridget set the tray over Hebe's lap. It held a spread of fresh fruit, Belgian waffles, thick-cut bacon, and a steaming carafe of coffee. "Mr. Sterling is a very thorough man. He leaves nothing to chance, especially regarding his guests." Hebe looked down at the food, her stomach giving a loud, embarrassing rumble. Derek had strictly controlled what she ate, constantly commenting on her weight, making her feel guilty for every calorie. I shouldn't eat all this, she murmured, her cheeks flushing hot. It's too much. Bridget paused, her sharp blue eyes softening just a fraction. Mr. Sterling explicitly instructed the kitchen to prepare whatever you desire, in whatever quantity. He mentioned you needed to rebuild your strength. Eat, Miss Carmichael. The chef will be highly offended if you don't. As Hebe awkwardly managed a fork with her left hand, a sudden, horrifying thought struck her like a physical blow. The fork clattered onto the china plate. My mother, Hebe gasped, panic seizing her throat. Oh my God, my mother, I texted her right before I accidentally texted Godiva. If Derek gets out, if his friends go looking for me, they know where she lives in Dorchester. Bridget raised a calm hand. Breathe, miss. Mr. DeSir. Sterling is already handling it. The door swung open wider, and Godiva filled the frame. He was dressed flawlessly in a navy blue three-piece suit, a silver tie perfectly knotted at his throat. He looked rested, dangerous, and impossibly handsome. The dark aura of violence that had surrounded him the night before was carefully tucked away, replaced by the polished veneer of a billionaire CEO. Good morning, Godiva said, his deep baritone sending an involuntary shiver down Hebe's spine. He nodded to Bridget, who immediately bowed her head and slipped out of the room, closing the door silently behind her. Godiva walked over to the bed, pulling up the wingback chair and sitting close enough that she could smell his bergamot and cedar cologne. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a brand-new top-of-the-line iPhone in a rose gold case. He placed it on the mattress beside her. Your old phone was destroyed, according to the scene at the apartment, Godiva said smoothly. This one is encrypted on my private network. Your new number is pre-programmed, and only 3 people have it, myself, Bridget, and your mother. Hebe's eyes widened. My mother? Godiva, please, you have to understand, she lives alone on Ashman Street. If Derek's bookies or his friends Hebe, Godiva interrupted gently, placing his large, warm hand over her uninjured left hand. The sheer size of his hand made hers look delicate. I told you last night, I take care of what is mine. Look at the phone. Trembling, he picked up the device with her left hand, swiped the screen, and saw a single text message notification. It was from a contact labeled Mom. Hebe, honey, I'm okay. A very polite, very frightening young man named Frankie picked me up this morning. I'm safe. Call me when you wake up. Love you. Tears welled in Hebe's eyes. She looked up at Godiva, completely overwhelmed. You brought her here? Not here, Godiva corrected. The estate is secure, but it is also the epicenter of my operation. It's not a place for a civilian mother to stay long-term. I had Frankie move her to a private, gated penthouse I own in the Back Bay. 2 of my best men are stationed at the door. She has a blank credit card for groceries and whatever she needs. She is entirely untouchable. Hebe let out a sob, covering her face with her good hand. For 2 years she had lived in a state of constant, suffocating anxiety, entirely responsible for surviving a monster she couldn't escape. In less than 12 hours, this ruthless mob boss had completely dismantled every threat in her life. Godiva frowned, leaning forward and gently pulling her hand away from her face. Why are you crying? Did Dr. Harrison not prescribe a strong enough dose? No, it's not the pain, Hebe sniffled, looking into his intense gray eyes. It's just, why? Why are you doing all of this for me? You don't know me. I'm just a mistake, a wrong number, a nobody. She looked down at herself, at the way the silk pajamas clung to her thick thighs and full stomach. The old, deeply ingrained insecurities flared up with a vengeance. I'm not exactly the type of woman a man like you saves. I'm not some supermodel. Look at me. Godiva's jaw tightened. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He stood up slowly, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the bed. He didn't look angry, he looked profoundly offended. He leaned down, placing a hand on the mattress on either side of her hips, caging her in. His face was inches from hers. "I want you to listen to me very carefully, Hebe Carmichael," Godiva growled, his voice a low, vibrating purr that made her breath hitch. "The men I deal with, the women who throw themselves at me in my world, they are plastic. They are hollow. They are starving themselves for an aesthetic that means absolutely nothing to me. Tive." He lifted one hand from the mattress and gently, reverently, traced the curve of her hip through the silk blanket. Hebe gasped, a sudden bolt of heat rushing straight to her core. "You are soft," Godiva murmured, his eyes darkening as they dropped to her lips. "You are real. When I carried you out of that hellhole last night, you felt exactly the way a woman is supposed to feel in my arms. Do not ever let the words of a dead man dictate how you see yourself. You are breathtaking, and if you ever insult yourself in my presence again, I will have to find creative ways to punish you. Do we understand each other?" Hebe's heart was beating so fast she thought she might pass out. The raw, unfiltered desire in the eyes of Boston's most dangerous man was entirely focused on her. He wasn't humoring her. He wasn't pitying her. He was genuinely captivated. "Yes," she breathed, her lips parting slightly. Godiva lingered for a second longer, his gaze dropping to her mouth before he abruptly pulled back, clearing his throat. The businessman facade snapped back into place, though his eyes remained dark. "Good. Eat your breakfast. Dr. Harrison will be by at noon to check the swelling. I have some business to attend to at the docks, but I will be back for dinner. Dress warmly. We are eating in the conservatory." He turned and walked toward the door. "Godiva," Hebe called out. He paused, looking over his broad shoulder. "Yes." "Thank you. For my mom." A small, genuine smile touched the corner of Godiva's mouth, completely transforming his harsh features. "You're welcome, Tessero." As the door clicked shut, Hebe picked up a strawberry, a strange, terrifying flutter taking root in her stomach. She had traded a domestic nightmare for a glittering, dangerous underworld. But for the first time in her life, she felt entirely safe. Pier 42 in the Seaport District was a desolate stretch of concrete and rusted metal, officially owned by a shell corporation dealing in international logistics. Unofficially, it was the graveyard where the Sterling Syndicate buried its problems. The rain from the previous night had stopped, leaving behind a biting, damp cold that seeped into the bones. Godiva stepped out of his black SUV, the saltwater breeze whipping his cashmere overcoat around his legs. His polished Oxfords crunched against the gravel as he walked toward a massive, corrugated steel warehouse at the end of the pier. Frankie the Bull Latier was waiting by the rolling door, a lit cigar clenched between his teeth. "Boss," Frankie grunted, tossing the cigar into the murky water below. "He's awake." Doc stitched up his wrist, but the kneecap is a total loss. "He's been crying for 3 hours straight." Godiva's expression was carved from granite. "Good. Open it." The heavy metal door rolled up with a screeching groan. The inside of the warehouse was cavernous and poorly lit by a few halogen work lamps. The air smelled of motor oil, damp earth, and blood. In the center of the concrete floor, illuminated by a single spotlight, sat Derek Walsh. He was tied to a heavy metal chair, shivering violently in a soiled t-shirt. His right leg was extended stiffly, wrapped in bloody gauze, and his left arm was heavily bandaged. His face was a bruised, swollen mess from where Godiva had struck him the night before. As Godiva approached, his footsteps echoing in the vast space, Derek shrank back, a whimpering sound escaping his cracked lips. "Sterling, Mr. Den." "Sterling, please," Derek begged, his voice a wet, pathetic rasp. "I have the money. I swear to God I can get the 50 grand. Just give me 2 days. My girl, Haby, her grandmother just died. The house in Salem is worth a fortune. I can sell it. Godiva moved faster than a man of his size should be able to. He grabbed a metal folding chair from the shadows, flipped it around, and slammed it down directly in front of Derek, sitting on it backward. He leaned over the backrest, bringing his face agonizingly close to Derek's. "Do not speak her name," Godiva whispered. The absolute quiet in his voice was infinitely more terrifying than a shout. "If her name crosses your teeth again, I will have Frankie extract them with pliers one by one. Nod if you understand." Derek nodded frantically, fresh tears spilling down his bruised cheeks. "You think you are here because of $50,000? Godiva asked, a cruel smile playing on his lips. He pulled a silver cigarette case from his coat, selected a cigarette, and lit it with a heavy gold Zippo. He blew a stream of smoke directly into Derek's face. 50 grand is what I spend on dry cleaning in a month, Derek. You are here because you laid your hands on something that did not belong to you." "I didn't know," Derek sobbed. "I didn't know she was yours. She never said." "She wasn't," Godiva corrected smoothly. "But she is now. And because you broke her arm, I am going to break every single bone in your body. But before we get to the anatomy lesson, you are going to tell me about the Salem property." Derek froze. The panic in his eyes shifted from physical fear to something much deeper, a structural, mortal terror. Godiva noticed the shift immediately. His instincts, honed by 20 years on the violent streets of Boston, flared. He leaned closer. "You are a low-level degenerate, Derek. You bet on college basketball and lose. You don't have the legal acumen to force a woman to sign over a deed to an inherited property without raising red flags with the probate courts. Someone put you up to it. Someone told you how to get the house." "No one," Derek stammered, looking away. "It was my idea. I needed the cash." Godiva sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. He stood up, dropping his cigarette to the concrete and grinding it out with his heel. He turned to Frankie. "Frankie, bring me the blowtorch. Wait." "Wait, Jesus Christ, stop!" Derek shrieked, thrashing against his restraints as Frankie walked over to a workbench and picked up a heavy blue propane torch. I'll tell you. Godiva held up a hand, stopping Frankie in his tracks. "Speak." Derek was hyperventilating, sweat mingling with the blood on his face. It wasn't about selling the house. The house isn't worth that much. It's about where it is. It has a private deep-water dock right on the Salem harbor. Godiva's eyes narrowed. A deep-water dock? The Sterling Syndicate controlled the commercial ports in South Boston and the North End, effectively putting a stranglehold on all illegal imports into the city. A private dock in Salem, off the grid and unmonitored by customs, was a smuggler's wet dream. "Who?" Godiva demanded, his voice dropping an octave. Derek swallowed hard. "O'Bannon. Declan O'Bannon." The name hit the silent warehouse like a bomb. Frankie cursed loudly in Italian, taking a step back. Godiva stood perfectly still, his muscles locking tight. Declan O'Bannon was the head of the Irish mob in Charlestown. He was a ghost, a ruthless psychopath who had supposedly fled to Ireland 5 years ago after a federal indictment for racketeering and multiple homicides. If O'Bannon was back, and making a play for a private port in Salem, it meant he was gearing up for a war. He was trying to bypass Godiva's tax on the docks to bring in weapons or heavy narcotics. "He's back?" Godiva asked quietly. "He never left," Derek whispered. "He's been operating out of the South Shore. One of his lieutenants, a guy named Sully, bought my debt from my old bookie. They said if I got her to sign the Salem house over to an LLC they set up, My debt was cleared, and they'd give me 100 grand on top. Godiva felt a cold, sickening dread pool in his stomach. Hebe wasn't just a victim of domestic abuse. She had been sleeping next to a ticking time bomb. By rescuing her, by bringing her into his world and taking Derek off the board, Godiva hadn't just saved her, he had unwittingly stepped directly into Declan O'Bannon's crosshairs. O'Bannon would be looking for Derek, and more importantly, he would be looking for the woman who held the deed to his new port. How long until they expect the deed? Godiva asked. Friday, Derek choked out. The probate clears on Thursday. I was supposed to bring the signed papers to a bar in Charlestown on Friday night. Oh, today was Wednesday. Godiva turned his back on Derek, walking toward the open loading dock, staring out at the grey, churning water of the harbor. The stakes had just shifted astronomically. Hebe was no longer just a woman. He felt an overwhelming, primal urge to protect. She was now a high-value target in an impending mob war. "What do we do with him, boss?" Frankie asked, gesturing to the sobbing Derek. "O'Bannon's boys are going to be looking for him." "Let them look," Godiva said coldly, without turning around. "Kill him. Put him in a barrel, fill it with scrap iron, and drop him in the Mariana Trench for all I care. But make sure it's clean. I don't want his body found. O'Bannon needs to think he took the money and ran." "No, please," you said. Derek's screams were abruptly cut off by a heavy, sickening thud as Frankie drove the butt of his pistol into the back of Derek's skull. Godiva didn't flinch. He walked back to his SUV, his mind racing. He had to fortify the estate. He had to move Barbara Carmichael to a more secure location, perhaps out of state. And he had to tell Hebe. He drove back to Lake Forest in silence, the weight of his violent world pressing down on him. He had spent his entire adult life building an empire of blood and shadows, and for the first time he regretted it. Because now, the one bright, pure thing that had accidentally stumbled into his life was in imminent danger because of the air he breathed. When Godiva returned to the estate, the sun was beginning to set, casting long, fiery shadows across the manicured lawns. He bypassed his study and walked directly up the grand staircase to the guest wing. He knocked softly on Hebe's door and let himself in. She was sitting in the bay window overlooking the gardens reading a book. She had showered and changed into a pair of soft black leggings and an oversized cream sweater that hung off her left shoulder. Her hair was damp and curled around her face. She looked peaceful. She looked beautiful. When she saw him, her face lit up with a genuine smile that hit Godiva like a physical blow to the chest. "You're back," she said. Setting the book down, Godiva walked over to her, his heart heavy. He noticed she was struggling to adjust the sling over her thick sweater with her good hand. Wordlessly, he knelt in front of her. He gently pushed her hands away. "Let me," he murmured. His large, calloused hands, the same hands that had just ordered a man's execution, were incredibly gentle as he adjusted the straps of the sling, lifting the heavy cast so it rested comfortably against her chest. He could feel the soft warmth of her body radiating through the sweater. He smelled the vanilla and honey body wash she had used. Hebe looked down at him, her breath hitching at his proximity. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly, noticing the dark circles under his eyes and the tense set of his jaw. "You look burdened." Godiva finished adjusting the sling and let his hands rest on her soft, thick thighs. He looked up into her hazel eyes, hating that he had to drag her into his darkness. "Hebe," he said, his voice thick with emotion he usually kept buried. "We have a problem, and it's much bigger than Derek Walsh." "What do you mean, a problem bigger than Derek?" Hebe asked, her voice a fragile whisper. She instinctively pulled the oversized cream sweater tighter around her thick frame, suddenly feeling incredibly exposed despite the heavy security of the Lake Forest estate. Godiva remained kneeling before her, his large hands still resting protectively on her thighs. The warmth radiating from his palms was the only thing keeping the chill of his words at bay. Derek wasn't acting alone, Godiva explained, his voice a low, steady rumble designed to keep her calm. He was in debt to a man named Declan O'Bannon. O'Bannon is the head of the Irish syndicate in Charlestown. He's a ghost, a violent sociopath who we thought fled the country years ago. But he's back, and he wants your grandmother's house in Salem. Haby blinked, her mind struggling to connect the dots. Nana's house? Why? It's just a drafty old Victorian on the water. The roof leaks. The plumbing is from the 60s. It's barely worth $500,000. It's not the house he wants, Haby. It's the land it sits on, Godiva said, his gray eyes darkening with dangerous calculation. Your grandmother's property possesses a private, deep-water dock that feeds directly into the Atlantic, completely bypassed by the Port Authority and Customs. O'Bannon wants to use it to run heavy artillery and narcotics into New England without paying my syndicate's tax on the main docks. Derek's debt was a manufactured excuse. They used him to get to you. They needed your signature on the deed. A wave of profound nausea washed over Hebe. The inheritance she had thought would be her quiet escape, her safety net, was actually the epicenter of a looming mob war. She looked down at her lap, tears welling in her eyes, spilling hot and fast down her cheek. "I'm so sorry," she choked out, her heavy chest heaving with a sob. "I brought this to your door. You saved me, and in return I've dragged you into a war. I'm just a burden. I've always been a burden." Godiva moved so fast it startled her. He shifted from his knees, sliding onto the window seat beside her, and wrapped his left arm tightly around her shoulders, pulling her soft, full body flush against his hard, muscular frame. He tucked her head under his chin, burying his face in her damp, vanilla-scented hair. "Do not ever say that," Godiva commanded, his voice vibrating with a fierce, terrifying protectiveness. "You are not a burden, Hebby. You are the only real thing in a world built on lies. O'Bannon is my problem. He has been my problem for a decade. You are simply the casualty he tried to use to get to me. And for that, I am going to erase him from the earth." He pulled back just enough to force her to look at him. His thumb gently wiped a tear from her jawline. "I told you, you are under my protection. That means all of you, your mother, your property, your life. But things are going to move very quickly now." Just then, the burner phone Godiva had given her vibrated violently on the small table next to the window. Godiva snatched it up. The caller ID read, Thomas Abernathy-esque. Per grandmother's probate attorney, Godiva had his tech team forward any calls from the lawyer to the secure device. Godiva answered, putting it on speakerphone. "Abernathy. Speak." "Wow. Who is this?" An older, panicked voice crackled through the speaker. "I need to speak to Haby Carmichael immediately. This is an extreme emergency." "This is Godiva Sterling. Miss Carmichael is indisposed. Whatever you have to say to her, you say to me." There was a long, terrified pause on the other end of the line. The name Sterling carried a heavy, bloody weight in Boston's legal circles. "Mr. Sterling." "Jesus," Abernathy stammered. 10 minutes ago, 3 armed men entered my office on State Street. They bypassed my receptionist and kicked my door in. They had a forged power of attorney signed by a Derek Walsh, demanding the deed to the Salem property. They said the probate cleared this morning." Hebe gasped, her good hand flying to her mouth. "Where are they now?" Godiva asked, his voice dead flat. "They left when I told them the physical deed had already been transferred to a secure courier for Miss Carmichael. Abernathy said, his voice shaking. But they trashed my office. They said they know she's in the city. They said they're going to find her, and if I alert the authorities, they'll kill my wife. Listen to me very carefully, Thomas, Godiva said smoothly. You will lock your doors. You will not call the police. I am sending a team to your office right now to escort you and your wife to a secure hotel until this is over. Do you understand? Yes. Yes, sir. Godiva ended the call. He looked at Hebe, the polished businessman completely gone, replaced by the apex predator of the Boston underworld. They are accelerating their timeline, Godiva said, standing up and smoothing his slacks. They know Derek is missing. They know the window to get that dock is closing. What do we do? Hebe asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. We give them exactly what they want, Godiva said, a cold, lethal smile touching his lips. We give them the deed, and when Declan O'Bannon steps out of the shadows to claim it, I will bury him under that dock. In the weeks following Le Bernardin, the Gallagher Empire didn't collapse, it suffocated, slowly and methodically, under Beatrice's calculated design. Federal agents swarmed the Brooklyn docks, dismantling operations piece by piece, choking off the steady flow of cash that had once sustained loyalty. Without money, allegiance crumbled. From Lorenzo's sunlit study, Beatrice directed it all with quiet authority. Draped in silk, she reviewed financial reports with surgical focus, seamlessly integrating what remained of the Gallagher assets into the Costa network. Every number told a story, and she rewrote each one. When vendors began skimming profits expecting the Irish to reclaim control, Beatrice didn't respond with violence. Instead, she deployed strategy offering reduced fees and exclusive contracts, turning fear into opportunity. Stability, she understood, was far more powerful than intimidation. Carmine carried out her instructions without question, his respect bordering on reverence. By the time Lorenzo returned, worn from negotiations, the shift in power was undeniable. He didn't interrupt. He simply watched, knowing the empire was no longer just his. It was theirs, but she was the one shaping its future. 2 years later, the heavy iron gates of the Sterling estate stood firm against the world, but inside, the cold fortress had been transformed into a warm sanctuary. Hebe Sterling sat on the edge of the sprawling mahogany desk in Godiva's private study, her caste long gone, replaced by a stunning, emerald-cut diamond ring that caught the firelight. She wore a tailored crimson dress that celebrated every soft curve and full line of her body. She no longer hid, but carried with the grace of a woman fiercely and unequivocally loved. Godiva stood behind her, his large hands resting gently on her waist as he reviewed the legitimate shipping manifests she had meticulously organized. The violence of their beginning had forged an unbreakable bond, built on mutual rescue. She had given the ruthless mob boss a reason to seek the light, and he had given the bruised accountant the absolute power to reign. She wasn't just his wife. She was the untouchable queen of his empire, proving that sometimes salvation arrives in the form of a wrong number and a beautiful, chaotic mistake.